Hey, welcome back. Come in, sit down. Don't be afraid of the front. The front is a friendly place. And don't be afraid of this side of the room as well. They've got I think the sight lines are very similar. I don't know why it's been rejected. Welcome back, welcome back. Before I introduce your next speaker on the main stage, I just wanted to remind you that there is a workshop happening in track 3 on the subject of, and this is a very long title, which I'm not sure I pronounced I said all of it before the break, concerned about regulatory compliance, question mark, examine how upcoming certification requirements such as AIMS affect conformity assessment bodies, AI developers, and users. And that's going to be presented by the Standards Council of Canada. So if that's something that is of interest to you and impacts the way that you work, head over to track 3. But if you're staying here, I can introduce our next headliner. He helps organizations innovate responsibly as a member of I-Sah's data ethics practice. And for the past 15 years, he's been an analytics advisor to the United Nations and the international development community and has implemented numerous award-winning projects. Here to talk to us about how to thrive in the modern market, mastering generative AI for enterprise prosperity, please welcome to the stage I-Sah Hsieh, Principal Program Manager for Data Ethics Practice, SAS.
Bonjour, bonjour, bonjour. Je m'appelle I-Sah Hsieh, and I'm afraid that's all the French I know. But I'm learning, all right? But more importantly, in the next 20 minutes, what I'd have to offer you, I guess according to the title, I'm going to make you guys masters at generative AI. No, but more importantly, right, I would love to share with you a perspective that I haven't heard shared yet today, which is from the field. So I work for a company called SAS. We've been providing data analytics, AI tools for the last 4.5 decades to Fortune 500 companies. So we've kind of had a front row seats to a lot of the growth of everything, but also what we get to do is just to talk a lot with Fortune 500 companies and executives. And so my goal, what I'm most excited to share with you today as I was preparing this talk, are some of the greatest hits from the private sector, right? Ways that generative AI in the last 12 months has been used to deliver true, meaningful business value. All right, so, but before we start, and this is just, let's take stock of where we are, right? This is where we are with ChatGPT today. What I love about this example is that it's no longer text. I could upload a picture of my bike and say, hey, how do I raise the seats? Oh, I don't know how to do that. Which tools do I use? Upload a picture of my toolbox, and it'll tell me which one to use. Right? And by the way, I'm going to share with you also the context of what's really resonating with the non-technical executives that we talk to that's getting them to see the value of generative AI, agree to fund the projects. Okay, so now moving forward, where else are we? We're moving into video generation, right? So all these videos, if you missed the caption in the beginning, are not real, generated by a prompt, right? And this is Sora, that was released back in early 2024, okay? And where are we going? I'll just fast forward, right? So we heard Irina earlier on this stage talk about, general AI and now, the multimodal capabilities, right, from generative AI, the ability to take pictures and audio and sound and everything and text and use it to start training robots. Like, it's becoming more and more common, right? And there's a lot of supercomputing capabilities that companies like NVIDIA, and we heard Hewlett-Packard Enterprise speak a little bit earlier about. So it's all very exciting. All these ingredients getting put on the table, and we're kind of, all of us, when I say we, all of us are there to try to mix up something yummy and helpful, right? We've all seen lots of these curves today, so I won't go into it. But here's my favorite part, is this quote right here, right? The hottest new programming language is now English. Right? And isn't that the beauty and the promise of generative AI? And I'm sorry, I'm trying not to hype you because I want to cut through hype and get into some real tangible case studies. But to simplify access to all this computing power down to a conversation, now we're removing barriers, right? And making some of these capabilities available to anybody who can have a conversation. So let's continue with just some of the, if we're going to talk generative AI and how to master it, let's start with some definitions to make sure we're talking the same thing, right? To me, to us, generative AI is any artificial intelligence system that's capable of generating content. And while that's a simple sentence, think about it, right? For the first time in human history, are we able to have an artificial intelligence system? And artificial intelligence, as we all know, has been around for decades, right? And it's been doing stuff, taking over tasks for humans. But for the first time in human history, we've got AI that can learn from billions of points of data, text, images, audio, whatever, right? And be able to generate net new content. And that's pretty exciting. Okay, I really like this slide for this crowd, right? Because one of the, and also for the crowd that I talk to, because one of the things that, you know how they always say that when you marry somebody, you marry the family, right? I want you guys to think of generative AI as, you know what, we're going to get serious with generative AI, but we're marrying the whole artificial intelligence family, right? And you know, AI started with machine learning, that then grew into, right, deep learning, that was just machine learning with some neural networks, and then natural language processing, and then all those are predecessors to generative AI. I want you to remember this, because this will come back, but having this broader picture, from a very practical standpoint, we'll get more projects funded, right? But we'll also improve the success rate of your generative AI projects. And I also talk to them about the economic impact of generative AI. You know, and these numbers just kind of make me scratch my head a little bit, right? That's a lot, like huge numbers, 13 trillion. And where does that come from? Where does that come from? You know, and the best way I can explain it is, you know, no, it's not just from the people that you get to fire or lay off, right, because of the efficiencies. But think about it. I mean, and we'll go through some of these examples and you'll start to see. If I can tell you that without doing anything different, but by just in your business, but other than, you know, let's, in a smart way, responsible way, deploy some AI, we can increase your sales by 20%, right, for your business. Oh, by the way, on top of that, we can help you get R&D products out to market 30% faster. And oh, by the way, at the same time, we can, you know, help your customer service organization handle 20% more complaints without any additional headcount. You can start to see how these numbers start to add up in terms of economic impact. Okay? And again, you're not, I mean, we all know this, but when we, again, speak to some of these non-technical executives, right? 2 out of every 3 executives believe that GenAI is a top organization priority, right? 90% of organizations are going to increase their AI investments, right? And here in Montreal, or here in Canada even, you know, I just heard about the 24 billion from Trudeau for AI, which is fantastic, right? As I'm really impressed, actually, with what Canada is contributing to the field of AI per capita. But this is a really exciting slide. Now we're starting to get to some of the meat, what I want to share. We work with a really large international bank, and the CIO says, we have 450 use cases that involve generative AI at the bank, right? Okay, well that's what we in the South, I'm from North Carolina, that's what we in the South call a possible hot mess, right? Right? But it's like, okay, where do we start? You know, how do we eat this elephant? And so, let me get to this part. So here are 8 of kind of what I call the greatest hits from the last 12 months of ways that enterprises have seen value in how they use generative AI. I'm going to start up top with complaints management, because I think that's something all of us can handle, unless you work for an organization that gets 0 complaints. Anybody? Anybody? So, you know, what we did for that bank that I was just telling you about was we allowed LLMs to do what they do best, right? And we injected it into the complaints management process, particularly in the beginning. So man, every day you get this huge influx of complaints. Well, let's use an LLM to summarize all those complaints. And so you're saving people the time to read it. It does a summary, and then it taps into kind of the quantitative reasoning parts of the organization that LLMs do not do well, right? And that's the part that we in our company normally handle for these organizations. And then you go through the churn analysis for that specific complaint and customer and so forth, and you do all your quantitative reasoning, and then you bring it back out and you feed it back into the LLM to then write up a suggested response, right? So by just doing that, they had a 20% increase on the number of complaints they were able to handle, right? Most of the reasoning and you didn't really change much about their process other than speed up the summarization and then the writing of the results, right? But that's quite a nice lift for any organization to be able to say, yeah, shortly after we flip the switch, we can handle 20% more complaints, and we're seeing complaints go down. Digital twins on the right, second one down on the right side, is one of two often overlooked little brothers, if you would, to the LLM in the generative AI family, right? Think about that. Obviously in the medical community, which of us don't want, raise your hand if you don't want the medical community to one day make a digital twin of you and run 100 million simulations on ways that your body might respond to certain, treatments or drugs before they actually test it out on you physically, right? I mean, that's a beautiful vision and dream. But it's not just for the health community. I've seen orchards, right? Agricultural businesses making digital twins of fruit trees in their orchards, and to great success. It's helping with their bottom line. But another example, and we heard a lot about today, is AI intelligent assistance, okay? And so here's an example. There's a I can't name the name, but the CPG, a consumer product goods manufacturer, right, that makes products that goes into every single household. And they have to make sure that they properly stock, right, take things from the production line and properly stock all the warehouses where their products are needed. So every day a driver has to come in and figure out, okay, how much of what do I take where, right? And so by putting an LLM into the process so that it is an automated, smart conversation with each driver, right? That has, what that has done is, and that has allowed, the everyday truck driver to have a conversation with and have direct access to the optimization algorithms that are being used, right? And so, over at our booth, we are asking a question of everybody that came by to say, hey, what do you think are the largest barriers for you, for your organization, for any organization, in adopting and integrating AI, right? So for those of you who said talent, right, examples like this is for you, because what the LLM is now doing, again, we're lowering the barrier to entry by bringing it down to a conversation. And now what you can do is take a very junior worker, right, a 1 or 2 year worker, but then having corrective actions from some of your most senior workers, built into the LLM to train them so that when it suggests corrective actions, now you have a very junior worker responding in a way that a very senior worker would. Okay? All right. And here's the third and last case study we'll talk about. And I like this one a lot. So this is the other often overlooked little brother, right, to the LLM in the world of generative AI, and that's synthetic data generation, right? I'll tell you a story of how that one little move saved a company, one of our customers, Georgia Pacific. They make paper products, $8 million, okay? I'll go into more detail on that in a second. But when you think about the AI lifecycle, and we don't have time to go into the AI lifecycle right now, but what it is, it's a very repeatable process that everybody who plays with AI and deploys AI has to go through. And quite simply put, if you can move faster on that AI lifecycle than your competition, you're winning, right? So often, you can see on the far left, the very first step is data. Data is the fuel that makes everything go around. So oftentimes, when you're trying to solve important problems, you either have data that's too sensitive, or you may not have enough data, right? Or you may have data that's too biased or not biased enough. And so this is where synthetic data generation comes in really handy. And by the way, that was the number 2 reason number 2 barrier answered by people who came across our booth in terms of barriers to AI for their organization. Okay? And so let me give you some examples here. And I don't have time to get into the life cycle, but you can stop by the booth and we can chat with you more about it more. But here are just some use cases, right, for synthetic data across various sectors and industries. Okay, but I'll leave that up for a second so you can take pictures. But so back to our friends at Georgia Pacific. So what they do is they take logs, right? They take logs and turn them into paper products, used in every household and office and so forth. So what they did was they used synthetic data generation in their computer vision models, right? So to train their computer vision models. So think about that, right? When they say that the most expensive, they were just telling us last week, the most expensive problems for them to solve are the ones where you didn't, the rare events, right? Where you didn't and couldn't anticipate what was going to happen. So what did they do? They used an image generator to generate, synthetically generate images of logs, each with various shapes and warps and stuff like that, to train the computer and vision model that they were using, for quality assurance, right? And so that, boy, if this is a really odd shaped log, you might want to tell the operator to turn the dial 3 clicks to the right to account for some of these, deformities, these non-standard shapes and so forth, right? So that move alone, again, allowed them to save $8 million. And then on top of that, then they started adding LLMs to just have that conversation with these operators, so that they say, well, it's actually looking more like this. So to tap into the knowledge base and return what they call corrective actions. Okay? So what do we learn from these handful of case studies that I just kind of breezed through with you? First takeaway is, a generative AI, again, is more than just large language models, right? Don't overlook the synthetic data generation. Don't overlook the digital twin capabilities. And here's another interesting statistic, right? So 2 out of every 3 leaders are a little bit dissatisfied with the progress that they've made and their organization has made on generative AI and AI. Well, why is that? Right? Because when you think about it, you've got a lot of organizations who are experimenting. It's easy to experiment, but only 5%, let me say that again, only 5% actually make it to full production and have generative AI in production processes and are able to scale that up, right? So, and when you think about it, and again, we don't have time to get into all of these, but happy to talk to you about it afterwards. I like this framework for many of the different challenges that an organization has to overcome in order to successfully deploy what we call responsible or trustworthy AI, right? But some of the first things that they get confronted with are data and security, data privacy, security, right? And also explainability. The hallucinations, right? Pardon me, the hallucinations from a large learning model. So how do we overcome some of that? So remember earlier I was telling you about the family that we're marrying into, right? Don't forget our good friends, in the NLP bucket, right? Good old-fashioned text analytics. So actually, if you want to scan the QR code, that is a white paper that one of my really smart, wonderful colleagues has written that shares 4 different techniques for using good old-fashioned text analytics to help minimize hallucinations for large learning models, right? To do some of the easier stuff, because you know what? I mean, large learning models are amazing. They do so much well, right? But they also use a lot of compute power. They're also super expensive. So this is, again, right, for those that are worried about cost, this is how we load balance some of the work so that we're not whacking everything with an LLM hammer, right, which we're kind of seeing in some organizations today. Right, does that make sense? So feel free to download the white paper. The second takeaway is that, LLMs alone do not solve the problem. So in every one of those examples I showed you, I think one of the best ways to deploy right now, as we're seeing, is, couple your generative AI with a important process in your organization, right? And don't be afraid to hook it into, so for us at SAS in our world, we provide the quantitative reasoning that'll support the LLM, right? And we also provide some of the smarts and analytics to help make the inputs of the LLM a little better, like I just talked to you about. But this is also where you got to think earlier about governance And sometimes people roll their eyes when I say governance. It's like, oh, you're just going to slow me down. But when I talk governance, I really like talking about it in the form of trustworthy AI, right? You want to be able to trust when somebody hands you AI-driven results. You want to be able to trust those results. You want to know the right questions to ask so that you can know whether you can trust those results. And you want to be able to have everybody else that you serve trust the results that you create, right? So, but very early on, bias, fairness assessments, right? The last thing, when I talk to executives around the world, one of the things that they say most often to me is, you know what, I need defendable decisions. I need defendable decisions, right? I don't want to wake up and find out that we had a problem or had something we overlooked from the newspaper. I need to have some of these things tested before they go out the door. And for those of you who, you probably know this, but there is a third-party AI incident database out there, and that's a great source to learn from, right? For us to just learn from each other's learnings, in this case. I know I'm going kind of fast, but here's my third and last takeaway, right? Human oversight will remain mandatory for a long time. Because the other thing that these executives around the world tell me is that, so one, they need defendable decisions. Two, they say, you know what, the demand for my services and products are increasing, but the availability of qualified workers is decreasing for me. And I hear, we talk about many things. You saw from that framework and all those bullets, we talk about many things, but those are the two most common things I hear across every single sector in every single geography, right? So what that tells me is that they're going to need us. They're going to need us to come alongside the AI and the generative AI that they're going to need to solve and address those problems. So let me just end by just saying, not only do those executives need us, and Fiona, if you want to come up and we can start taking questions, but we need us, right? None of us can do it alone. So let's continue to just celebrate and replicate each other's successes and learn from each other's learnings. And I thank you so much for your attention today. Merci beaucoup. Okay?
I-Sah Hsieh. Thank you so much. So we do have time for some questions. So please, if you have a question for I-Sah, raise your hand in the air. We have a couple of folks with microphones who can make their way to you. Raise your hand. Don't be shy. Here we go. There's a gentleman in what I call the middle section, because that's the one I'm mainly staring at. Could we get a microphone over here? Oh, here we go. Thank you so much. And if you could stand up, sir, and just say who you are if you're comfortable doing so, and obviously ask your question.
In the 5% the 95% of the companies that fail to get a model in production, what is the number one, let's say, blocker that they hit?
Yeah, so I think, a lot of times they get stuck on the data and the security side of things, because, it's pretty easy for us to spin up ChatGPT or whatever, but it's like, okay, I'm ready now to tailor this for my purposes, right? All of a sudden, you have to make that hard decision of the data that I need to take from my organization to train it for my purposes. Where is that am I gonna upload it into ChatGPT? Right? Not a good idea, right? Or do I need to write a big check with lots of zeros to set up my own environment, right? This is where kind of the rubber meets the road. That's often a big one, right? From a data and just budget perspective.
Good question, then. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Do we have any? I see a hand in the back here. I'm going to try and there's a lady. Could you put your hand? I can see you, but not everyone can. There we go. That was very bold. I admire it. Oh, perfect. You're next, I promise.
Thank you so much for your talk. You spoke about 5% of companies are successfully adopting AI, and specifically generative AI. Is there any commonalities between those companies? Are they companies that were already all in NLP processes or already had data science teams involved? Or are they companies that are totally pivoting towards this new technology?
Yeah, so if I heard the question right, sorry, it was just, of that 5%, right, what are the commonalities? And again, our perspective is biased towards our world, right? But when they hook, I think it's really wise of them to hook in these generative AI projects to some of these really mission critical functions that you know, for us, we as SaaS and our technologies have been a part of, because there's already governance there. It's already a critical function, so you already have lots of eyes and lots of humans, you know, just around to just make sure, you know, they say it takes a village, right, to raise a child and a generative AI model, right? Same thing. So I think those are the commonalities in our world. You know, because at the end of the day, it comes down to business value, right? It's what we're doing, delivering business value. So we want to deploy our efforts in our generative AI on things that are valuable, but to be really careful and thoughtful about how we do that so we don't wreck anything.
I believe we had, I didn't see you, but I know you exist because my colleague said there was someone back here, gentleman right at the back there. Thank you.
How do you use generative AI LLMs in air-gapped systems where we don't want to have the data out for cloud systems or third-party?
Yeah, so I think the question was, how do we use generative AI systems? Would you mind if we table that till afterwards? Because I don't know that I can give you a good enough response right now. That would matter to everybody as well, but please, let's talk afterwards.
We can table that. I know we had, there's a lady here, I'm looking at, so 3 rows from the, I'm going to be trying to be more useful. Microphone, sorry, 3 rows from the back here. This lady here. If you could stand up as well, that would be marvelous. Thank you. Could you stand up, just for the camera?
Hello.
Perfect.
Yes. Thank you so much for the speech. I really appreciate that you were saying a lot how GenAI can bring a lot of business value to the company. And then from our experience, like we also see a lot of companies, they are also very conservative about the investment in GenAI. So my question would be, what do you think would be next GenAI trend in 2024?
Ooh.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. Next gen AI trend in 2024. Yeah, again, I don't know that I'm the best person to answer that, but I think, right, these digital twins, we're going to hear a lot of. There's a lot of work being done there. You know, synthetic data generation, I mean, you know, I know for us as an organization, we're trying to accelerate that curve by coming out with a synthetic data maker. So I think we're going to see an explosion there. And obviously, you've got so many advances on the LLM side of things, right? Like, I think that's the 3-legged stool. Sorry, I don't know that that's a good answer for you, but I think more of the same, but just we'll see some better stories come out.
I think that's a good answer. Now, I don't think we have time for any more, so please give a big hand to I-Sah Hsieh.
Thank you so much.
And I'm sure if you have a question, I-Sah will be around so you could grab him, and I'm sure he can take some of these questions offline.